Again, today's questions are asking if I would discuss stalking. What kind of people stalk others? Why do they do it? What would the personality type of a stalker be? To answer those questions, I'm going to look at some of the research that has been carried out into stalking, and I'll add the links to that research in the description of this video. But I'm also going to look at the different kinds of stalker and the effect that being stalked can have on its victims. So if you like this video, if you find it interesting or helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel. But just to remind you though, this video is for information purposes only. Now, first of all, I would like to say that all of us at some point have maybe went on to social media and done a search for an old friend, maybe an old school friend or perhaps an old work colleague. Sometimes we've looked at the profile of an old boyfriend or girlfriend just to see what they look like now, to see what they're up to now. We may have went looking for more information on a famous person, but this is usually out of curiosity or perhaps feeling nostalgic. Once we get the information, it generally ends there. It doesn't go any further. That is not necessarily the same as stalking. Stalking is not a single act. It is a series of actions which can involve, among other things, phone calls, emails, sending gifts, sending threats, terrorizing, following someone, either following them online or following them in real life. It is defined as repeated and persistent unwanted communications, approaches, intrusions into someone's life, into their privacy, and there can be many different levels to it. Now, some victims may not be aware they're being stalked. Sometimes a stalker may not necessarily have any malicious intent. Perhaps they're obsessed with their target, admire them from a distance. They may be misguided, think that they're in love, or think that their victim is in love with them. They may have a desire to help or rescue or support them somehow. But there is a darker side to stalking which evokes fear in victims. The stalker could be relentless in their harassment, calling, messaging them repeatedly, perhaps sending gifts or sending threats, becoming aggressive if that attention is not being reciprocated, if that person does not want their help. The behaviors can be very intrusive. There could be spying, following someone, turning up at their home or their place of work. They could be recruiting others to follow and gather information or to communicate on their behalf. Stalking is a form of mental abuse. It is a form of mental assault. And social media has made stalking easier. Stalkers can follow and spy on their victims without ever having to leave their home. Someone could be stalked by someone with multiple accounts, or they could be stalked by multiple people with the same agenda. Now, when the stalker is a stranger, it may be because they fantasize over someone or have a hatred for someone. There may be threats, threats of violence, sexual threats. There could be threats of dire consequences if the victim does not comply. There could be constant communication, letting the victim know you have no privacy. You are not safe. And this kind of stalker would commonly have more than one victim, and they assert control by creating fear through intimidation and aggression. Now, the research suggests that when it's a stranger, they're less likely to carry out their threats because if they did, they would have no one to control. That being said, there are always exceptions. There have been many instances where there have been violent assaults, even murder in some cases. But the fact that there are threats there at all, whether those threats are genuine or not, can be terrifying for the victim. Former, sometimes current partners would be the most common type of stalker. Now, for a current partner who stalks, they could be maybe obsessed with knowing everything about their partner, their whereabouts, their activities, even following them when they go out. They could experience an intense anger and intense anxiety if they don't know where the partner is, if they feel they have no control over the partner. 80% of people who have been in abusive relationships have claimed that they were stalked by their partner during the relationship. For an ex-partner, the loss of relationship can feel like a bereavement. They want to keep some kind of contact, but it is not reciprocal. Now, some may just disappear into the background, watch from a distance. Other times it can be more sinister, more threatening. Stalking from a former partner tends to be more persistent and usually lasts longer. A study from the UK's Stalking Threat Assessment Centre described ex-partner stalking as potentially the most dangerous, as they have easily bruised egos, flimsy interpersonal boundaries, smouldering rage and jealousy, and a relentless tenacity. But what kind of person stalks other people? What is it motivates them? Well, not all stalkers would suffer from things like hallucinations or delusions. Some may. There may be a delusional or a psychotic disorder present, but many do suffer from other forms of mental illness. Now, this could include depression, addiction, substance abuse, and personality disorders. Many suffer with obsessiveness and paranoia. There is also a high prevalence of insecurity, anger, and impulsiveness. In 2012, an article published in the journal Aggression and Violent Behavior stated stalkers can fall under a variety of diagnoses. This could include psychotic disorders, personality disorders such as narcissistic personality disorder, and delusional disorders. The motivations for stalking can include a delusional belief in a romantic destiny, a desire to reclaim a prior relationship, a sadistic urge to torment the victim, or a psychotic over-identification with the victim and the desire to replace them. I would also suggest there are strong elements of antisocial personality. Now, this could include psychopathy and sociopathy. Also, it's not uncommon for there to have been a history of domestic abuse. Now, Paul Mullen and the team from Victoria's Forensic Care Centre, now that's a high security hospital for mentally ill offenders, they analysed the behaviours of 145 stalkers, and based on their analysis, Mullen and the others proposed there are 5 stalker subtypes. Firstly, there is the rejected stalker. They pursue their victims in order to reverse or to avenge a rejection. Commonly, this might be a partner who does not want to accept the end of the relationship. It could also be a family member, a parent, or a friend that the victim has broken contact with. When attempts to reconcile fail, the stalker may increase their efforts. They may go looking for information as to where the victim is, who they're with, what it is they're doing, or looking for information that they can use. Now, they may use it to try further attempts at reconciliation, or they may use it to fuel the misery that they already feel, or they may try to use it to seek revenge due to their inability to accept the end of the relationship. They may use manipulative behavior such as bringing or threatening to bring legal action against their victims. They may label their victims as having a mental illness. They may even threaten to harm themselves or someone else to coerce their victims to intervene. But these tactics are all about trying to force the victim into some kind of contact. Then there is the incompetent stalker. Now, they may have a fixation or an obsession, or in some cases, a sense of entitlement to an intimate relationship or friendship with someone who has attracted their attention. This person believes their behavior might lead to a closer relationship, seeking some kind of contact or intimacy. Now, Mullen believed that this kind of stalker to be socially awkward and intellectually limited. They tend to continue stalking even when their victim is not reciprocating, and tend to use methods that can be creepy, frightening, and counterproductive. Next, there is the intimacy seeker. Now, this is when someone identifies, usually a stranger, though not all the time, but they identify someone and believe that they are the one. They try to establish a friendship or an intimate, loving relationship with their victim. It's like they were meant to be together. They fantasize and sometimes behave as if the love is reciprocated. Then there is the predator stalker. Now, they have no desire for any relationship with their victims. They just want power and control. They find pleasure in gathering information about their victim now, either getting it from others or from those close to the victim, or perhaps searching back through social media posts, comments from years back. Any information is power to them. They might try to use it to manipulate or to use against their victims. They use it to justify their actions to themselves. They often troll their victims, fantasizing about assaulting them or spying on their victims in order to plan an assault. They tend to want to gain control of others, often due to feeling little or no control over their own lives, and they tend to have voyeuristic and sadistic desires. And lastly, there is the resentful stalker. Now, this stalker feels some sense of injustice and desires revenge against their victim. They pursue a vendetta out of some sense of grievance. They are motivated mainly by a desire to frighten and to punish their victim. And the cruelty of their behavior often reflects their perception that they have been treated unfairly, perhaps humiliated, even though it is way out of proportion. Because in many cases, they may have just had to face the consequences for their own already bad behavior. Perhaps they've been dumped by a partner, or fired for misconduct, or perhaps even charged with a crime, but they view themselves as the victim and are seeking some kind of revenge. They don't see themselves as a stalker, but on some moral crusade, some crusade to right or wrong. The belief often being, if I am suffering, so should you. And calling them out on their stalking behavior tends to make things worse because this kind are both vindictive and vengeful. But regardless of the type of stalker, their motivations, among other things, what we often see is a need to control others, an inability to cope with any kind of rejection, low self-esteem, selfishness, narcissistic and sadistic behaviors. They can be manipulative and deceitful and can have a dependency on others. And being stalked can be a terrifying experience. Being on the wrong end of someone who might be obsessive and controlling, threatening and aggressive, and have no regard for anyone else's safety or privacy can cause psychological trauma. And because it generally isn't a single isolated incident, it is often a repeated and relentless assault. It also has a cumulative effect. The victim's very life, their lifestyle, is being assaulted through unwanted intrusions. In many extreme cases, the victim is often denigrated, which allows the stalker to act without conscience or empathy because the target is just an object, not a fellow human being. And it can leave victims living in a state of fear, living under constant threat, being hypervigilant, constant safety-seeking behaviors. It can cause, among other things, sleep disruption, nightmares, flashbacks, self-isolation. Now, if you have been or are being stalked, I would invite you to think about reaching out to someone for support. I'm going to put the link